Welcome everyone to another episode of Gripsport Latino. Today we have a remarkable guest, Mr. Randall Strossen. How are you today, Randall? Dr. Randall Strossen.
How are you? I'm just teasing for. Great, and really fun to be here. I'm, interested in your background, okay, because I know nothing about your background and flattered that you want to talk to me. So looking forward to this conversation.
Super nice. So, Randall, let me introduce myself real quick. I am Francisco, also known as Pancho. My friends call me Pancho, and everybody on the group community calls me Pancho. So, I am 31. I started practicing grip sport and got into grip in 2018. I come from calisthenics, powerlifting, and many high school sports. So I have been into sports all my life, basically. And I started purchasing Captains of Crush grippers, and I got really hooked from them. And I wanted to be like a world famous or world known person into this sport because I found it really interesting. So I have been into this sport for 6 years, and 2 years ago I decided that I wanted to like make a big organization, brand, and project in South America because I know there's a lot of like sport talent in Latin America, but there's like a huge entry barrier for grip sport in general, which is mostly of the athletes and most of the information is in English. So good thing that I know enough English to understand everybody and to do a podcast about it. So I decided to do this project, and then every lesson that I learn here is something that I give back to the Spanish-speaking community. Not only Latin America, there's also people from Spain and Mexico who are like looking into our reels and our social media.
Right.
And I have also been building grip equipment, loading pins, pinch blocks, etc., because shipping is expensive from the US to Chile. Right. But I am crazy enough, and I have the willingness to pay and the resources to have the original equipment. And we are organizing many championships here in Chile, and
excellent.
we are doing many events related to Gripsport International. And that's pretty much it. And well, to tell you like a couple of famous people into the group community that have been into the podcast. First one, Nathan Hall, Jet Johnson, Eric Rusain, and many of the latest like Crush to Dust certified people like Jalen Worley, Zach Mullins, Ben Helms.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
How's Nathan doing these days?
He's super good. He just released a new product, the HD3 for the inch dumbbell training. So he's doing super well. Yeah. He actually made the trophies for our first contest. So we are like going back and forth talking all day. So
excellent. Well, tell him I say hi. Okay, next time you talk to him.
I will.
Yours, yeah.
I will do it in your name. So, Randall, this is the first question of all my episodes. We want to hear it from your own words. Who is Dr. Randall Strossen?
Kids, the evil Dr. Strossen. Some people, I say, I used to use this thing, TEDS, because I think when the grip board got established, to have a group, to have an in-group, you've got to have an out-group. And Ironmind, we had the honor of creating something that was of a lot of interest to a lot of people. I think a lot of people said, oh, I could do this. And I want to do this too. And we need kind of an evil person, and that was me. Okay. That's where the TEDS things come from, the evil Dr. Strossen. And so I have a different background, I think probably, of course, from a lot of people in grip, people who are grip specialists. I've got a really substantial background in strength sports. Photojournalist, primarily, not really competitor. I did 5 Olympics. I did, I don't know, lost count of how many world weightlifting championships from 1990 to I think 1918, till 2019, sorry. Countless European weightlifting championships, World Strongest Man contests, Highland Games World Championships, Arm Wrestling World Championships. So I had strength training in my background. So for example, I understood what calibration meant, and this was like one of the big things, people in the grip board kept talking about like calibrated grippers, and they actually meant rated grippers. And I tried to explain that to them, and, I became evil because of that. Let's see, what were some of the myths? The dog leg myth. I tried to explain the myth of the dog leg for so many years. And I think now in the grip board, they've gotten rid of that. They understand that it doesn't matter, gripper's symmetric, it might look different, but the forces are symmetric, doesn't matter. What was the other? The seasoning one. I used to really make fun of that. I said, yeah, seasoning is great. Hot sauce, salt, pepper, whatever you prefer. And see, that was a funny thing because I think people who had a substantial or significant lifting background would understand that whole concept of seasoning. If you had a bar, you buy a cheap bar from, say, Asia, just crummy bar, put 400, 500, 600 pounds on it, lift it one time, it's going to bend. Okay. You take an Eleiko bar, you could drop it from arm's length overhead all day long, with 250 kilos on it, nothing's going to happen to it. Okay. Same thing with a spring and a gripper. Okay. Seasoning. Okay. Yes. The gripper would change if in fact it was insubstantial, if it was inadequate, wasn't up to the task. Okay. But a gripper, say with like Captain's Crutch with a J8 spring, rep after rep, it's not going to change. So that was another myth. And I kind of reveled in being, the outcast. And I think now we've made peace. And part of that's just sort of like me mellowing. I don't get in arguments with people anymore. And I think that there's been a lot of evolution in the thinking, in terms of grip people. So they understand now the myth of the dog leg. They understand the myth of seasoning. They understand the difference between calibration and rating. And so the next thing I think that I'd like to see happen is people have to realize that giving a single number rating to a gripper doesn't really accurately tell you how hard it is to close. But that might take, I don't know, maybe another 5 years. So that's sort of my background. Always interested in strength sports. I might even be able to dig out my original Warren Tedding gripper that I bought when I was probably 15 or 16. I'm 72 now, so it tells you how long I've had that gripper. And that's what started this whole thing with me. So anyway.
Perfect. Randall, I wanted to know, one of the subjects that I wanted to cover with you is the origin of Ironmind as a company, as a concept.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I have a PhD in experimental social psychology from Stanford, and I didn't want to be a professor. I didn't want to be a clinical psychologist. And so I ended up in marketing research, but I've lifted weights since I was 14. And I like writing. And so I decided that I would try to write a sports psychology column for Ironman magazine, which is one of the largest newsstand bodybuilding magazines in the US at the time. I sent in five columns, what you call on spec, there was no guarantee that they'd be published or anything. And to my horror, right after I'd sent these in, right after I'd sent them in, Frank Zane, who's Mr. Olympia, started a column called The Bodybuilding Psychologist. And I was crushed. I was devastated. I'm dust. I don't know, maybe a month later, John Balick, the publisher, called up in the days of answering machines, sort of what people now call voicemail, left a message for me, loved what you wrote, like to start this column. I was thrilled. And so that's what started. The column was called Ironmind, okay? And quickly on the motivation, I mentioned, my PhD is in experimental social psychology, okay? So social psychology is things like, studying conformity, which is part of why I have this interest in groups and what makes groups tick and so forth. But I felt that in sports psychology, the only tool that people used was, relax and visualize success. Okay. And I don't know about in Chile, but in the United States, there's a joke, like a doctor, an MD will say, take 2 aspirins and go to bed. Okay. And it works very well. I mean, in all sorts of circumstances, okay? It works very well. Not always, but it does. And I felt that the relax and visualize success was the clinical or performance psychologist's counterpart to the MD's advice, take 2 aspirins and go to bed. So the Ironmind column, which ran every month for, I think, a little over 12 years before I retired it, didn't talk about stuff like that. We talked about different things, okay? And that was kind of it. And then I decided that these grippers that I liked should be brought back to market. Warren Heading had long since, quit making them. And one thing led to another. I should mention too, so I wrote Super Squats along the way. So Super Squats, okay, I wrote that originally as an article that I sent to Esquire, okay, which was, published top fiction, nonfiction, at least back then. And I never knew that mail, what people now call snail mail, could go so quickly to New York and get back to California. In other words, it was rejected that fast. And I said to my wife, not to worry, I'll turn this into a little pamphlet or something. I still kind of like the concept. And I turned it into a book, and the book became a bestseller in the field. Now, don't worry, but bestseller in the field in those days, I mean, that didn't really mean you sold so many books, but it became a really well-recognized cornerstone book, and people still buy it. I mean, it's been translated legally into like a couple languages and illegally into a bunch more. In fact, once I was in China, it was being picked up for the Asian Games. Asian Games in Asia is probably, they could maybe even be bigger than the Olympics as far as status and everything. And picked up, flying, get picked up. Oh, Dr. Strossen, so nice to meet you. Your book, Super Squats, is people love it in China. Everybody talks about it. I said, gosh, that's really interesting, because I knew it had never been translated into Chinese legally, right? I said, I'd love to see a copy. And I said, I'll bring you one the next day. And I've been silence. But anyway, so Super Squats started at the same time. And then Super Squats and the gripper and the Super Squats hip belt were original 3 products. And that's kind of like how Ironmind, the company, started, as opposed to Ironmind, the sports psychology column. Long answer to a short question, huh?
No, but it's perfect. We are here to listen from you, because I am sure that many of the people who jump into the gripper world after the pandemic, like recently, maybe they don't know about you. Only the older athletes like Jed, on people who was like pre-pandemic, they know you, but I am here to show the world about you, because I didn't catch any video interview or podcast of you. So this is this is a great time for me and for the group community.
Do you translate these into Spanish for the Hispanic community or not?
Sometimes, yes. I used to do it with an application that could translate with 80% accuracy, but right now I don't have one, because if we speak about grippers or dog legs seasoning and that's sort of words that are in a context, it's not going to do it right, But in the case what I like to do is I pick the greatest highlights and then translate them to Spanish and do a video about it and a reel on Instagram and tell this is the best the best lessons from Dr. Randall. And then I put a video of you translated, but the whole interview, it's a lot of time right now. But I will eventually do it with artificial intelligence, I expect. But we're gonna find out about that.
Yeah, I was curious because there doesn't seem to be right now. I don't know, I'm not sure about say in terms of gripboard representation, but if I think of our customers, Ironmind's customers, I don't know if there's substantial group in say South America or Central America, for example, or a lot of grip strength competitions. You mentioned Gripsport down there, so you do have some competitions.
Yes, I am. Good. I am there's another guy related to Arm Lifting USA whose name is Bruno. He has been doing competitions since 2019.
Okay.
And I have been doing my ones in my organization as well. But in example, Brazil is a big market and they haven't been into Gripsport yet with competitions or with athletes.
We just had a guy certified from Brazil on the 3, I think. Yeah, and he was impressive, as I recall. It seems like a natural, Brazil, the interest in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Well, of course, I don't know how big that is within Brazil, but I always thought too, for example, in Mexico, the great tradition of boxing. And as far as preventing hand injuries, reducing, well, maybe not preventing, but reducing the incidence of hand injuries, because we've had a fair number of boxers train on captain's crux grippers for that reason. So
Yes. Actually, those two countries, well, Pedro Tamayo certified recently on the number 3, and Fernando Ferraz wants to certify from Brazil. He was like the previous guest of the podcast. So
Oh, really? Yeah.
yeah, I knew a little about him. The episode is in English. If you want to check it out, I can send it to you afterwards.
Ah.
But yeah, he's serious about this stuff, and he bought like a number 3 rated, not calibrated, rated by Canon. So he's into it. I
Yeah.
remember I had an interview with Matt Cannon as well,
Yeah.
and he told me about, yeah, firstly, it's not calibration, it's
Yeah.
rating.
That's good. Yeah. I've never met Matt in person. He seems like a great guy. Warren really liked him, and I really enjoy the email correspondence I've had with him. But that took me a long time, a long time to explain the difference to people. But see, I mentioned earlier that I've got this background in strength sports. I mean, all these weightlifting contests I went to like for decades and decades and decades. I mean, I lived at the top of the strength world, as a journalist and photojournalist for 30 years or something, 30 plus years. See, things like calibration are clear to someone like me because we know what a calibrated barbell plate is. Okay. And most people don't realize that, first of all, they're lifting with uncalibrated barbell plates all the time. Okay. It might say it's 10 kilos, but it might be 9, it might be 11, who knows? And calibrated means that it's brought to that exact weight. It doesn't mean that you weigh it and then write on it, what it is. That's not a calibrated plate, that's a rated plate. Hang on one sec. I just want to see if I can quickly find that original gripper. I have the urge to show it to you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, share this with everyone. Well, the grip gods must be shining on this because I found it pretty easily.
Oh,
so this is original Warren Tedding. Well, Warren's name actually didn't really appear very often in the advertising in the old original Ironman magazine. Okay, Ironman ran from used to probably know exactly, but roughly say 1936 to 1980 or so, 85 or so, when Period Raider, the founder, sold it to John Balick. But these were sold as Ironman grippers, and you can grip board guys, gripper aficionados who really get a kick out of this. I mean, what this looks like. I mean, spread. I know lots of guys now that can measure everything on their grippers, but I mean, this is massive. I mean, I could grab a COC. Hang on one sec. I should have thought ahead just to show you, kind of the difference side by side. In the COC book, we have a bit of this, but I mean, the handle spreader, if you can see that. Yeah, I mean, it's roughly, can you see that? Like roughly a half a handle width wider, which you well know, I mean, what a difference that would make.
Yes.
It's very accurately, but anyway, that's the original beast. That's what inspired me. I've had it all these years, and I used to go carry this around sometimes. Later in life was when I'd really switched to being, a journalist. And people like Mike Dayton, strongman, was like one of the people who go, hey, Mike, after he hangs himself and, supposedly bent a quarter. He didn't actually bend it, I don't think, but, convinced a couple of people he did. Did traditional strongman things like that. I think he broke a baseball bat over his leg and stuff. Hey, Mike, could you close this? And my wife would later say, you're really lucky he didn't just hit you with that. But anyway, so that's it. That's the original. This is where it all started for me.
I read the book since you asked me, did you read the book? Yeah. And I bought the book, the Kindle version, to read it fast. And actually it was like something that I needed. Like the pieces of information were like things that I needed to know, because I am really into history and into the origin of things, and into the history of companies, and into the origin of the grippers. So I could see that you got that gripper on year 66 or 67.
Right.
And that it was made from Warren Chetting.
Exactly, yeah.
I was curious to know, like, if you had to compare that gripper with any level of resistance of modern COCs, where does it sit?
I think Joe Rourke once wrote an article on the Tedding grippers. I'm trying to think what the name of his newsletter was. Iron Game History, maybe? Or is that Jerry Todd's? I get them mixed up. Anyway, part of the problem was these had different names at different times, and not being, grip board kind of guy. I've never even measured the diameter of the spring, but my rough guess is between a 1 and a 2.
Okay.
So, and this was, I think at that time, I believe, and someone could research this, they could get Ironman magazine from that era. I've got them, but I've never bothered to look it up. I believe this is from the era when there were 3 strengths offered. As I say, it changed over time. Warren's attitude was always, it's kind of great. It's like the opposite of standardized everything. Warren would always say, what difference does it make, right? Warren, the grip was a lot wider this time. So what? What difference does it make, right? You know, the eye bolts welded this way this time. What difference does it make? And, it's kind of a good attitude too, because it's like, say, the difference between lifting something like the inverse stone, the actual stone, as opposed to something that's cast from concrete, right? Or I never saw one, but people tossing, I guess, steel cabers as opposed to cabers that, are from trees and of different characteristics. So some of the charm is in that attitude that Warren's got. What difference does it make? But then again, the people who are trying to turn things into a sport, make it standardized. They want 100 meters to be 100 meters, not 98 or 103, right? So anyway, yeah. But I say to people, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but somewhat realistically too, if you've read the Captains of Crush book and learned most of the stuff, if you could get like at least a B+ on it, you'll be way smarter than 99% on grippers, way smarter than 99% of the people on the internet. If that's what your goal is in terms of understanding as well. Although I think level of knowledge is increasing rapidly. One of the objections I used to have to a lot of the, let's call them the internet grip communities, was that I think there was an interest because of focusing on group cohesion to limit the advance of knowledge. Okay, and the same myths were perpetuated over and over and over again, and people could have gotten much smarter, much faster on grippers, and everyone would have gotten stronger much faster, quicker as a result of that. It's not just that you do well on the test, but you would probably get smarter with your training and get stronger as a result. So anyway, yeah, the book has a lot of history. Some of it now is like ancient history, because I mean, this was written quite a few years ago at this point. I can't tell you what year. Maybe you know what year it was written.
I don't remember, but
you read it too fast.
It was fast, yes.
No,
but I saw that the last
2009,
was 2009.
2003 originally, and then 2009.
Yeah. I remember the 2009 because that's the year I met my wife. So it's a year that I never forget.
Congratulations.
So
what was the most interesting thing, can I ask you, that you learned about the history of Captains of Crush grippers?
Well, it was super interesting to me that, I mean, before reading the book, I thought like the Captains of Crush grippers were like starting into like 2001 or something like that. But no, there were grippers on the 60s, and they stopped producing them on the 77, I think. And then you with Ironmind wanted to bring them back, and I was like, oh, and I learned about the Silver Crush. And I saw many like name changes. They changed their name, they changed the packaging, So well, they changed to be the Silver Crush until 95, and then they became the COC that we all know.
Right.
Why did you make like those changes of the names or rebranding?
Yeah, it wasn't just rebranding, quote unquote, meaning that it wasn't taking the same product and giving it a different name. The product was evolving in a really significant way. So originally, the very first grippers that Ironmind sold were all made by Warren Tedding, and they were like the Warren Tedding grippers, from the Ironman magazine days. And then I had ideas about how I wanted to evolve things like moving toward improved standardization, so on and so forth. And we tried things like, chrome plating the springs, which was just a disaster. I got to tell you, just a disaster for us. And, for people who wanted to keep them as collector's items, the thing was, usually I don't explain all this to people. I think, although maybe most people might know it now in the gripper community, you run into this nasty beast called hydrogen embrittlement that brings the springs snap way, way earlier than they need to. So anyway, that kind of ended Silver Crush, and then we did a big change in the handle. See, Warren's gripper was the first one that at least I know of, a real grip historian like David Horn would know. whether there were any steel or metal of any type. You know, there might have been brass handled grippers earlier, but if Warren's was really the first steel handled gripper, okay? And then we had the idea then that we were going to go to aluminum, and that was radical. This was Captains of Crush, you know, came up with this idea first. And of course, now every Me Too wannabe Captains of Crush copycat gripper, the standard is aluminum. And see, aluminum has a lot of advantages over steel, okay? It's lighter, so it means it's less expensive to ship. Why pay to ship a bunch of steel if you don't have to? It knurls very well. And a freshly knurled Captain's Crush gripper really sits very tightly in your hand, and it looks nice. You know, it's a space kind of maybe kind of space age material in a way compared to steel. So that was why the name changes. So it's the evolution of the gripper, and in that I think we got sort of like that family tree genealogy in the front of this book. You can probably see those changes, although. Did we include the pre-COCs in those pictures? Yeah, so those were black marker. Yeah, we've got all that packaging. Yeah, so the original were still, not okay. These are all actually Captains of Crush. Yeah, the packaging went through a lot of changes. I'll tell you a quick funny story. So I don't know if you can see this. Can you see when, I mean, maybe some guys out there have, let me put my reading glasses on so I can see better what you're seeing. Some of the collectors out there might remember this packaging from way back,
Yes.
this sort of diamond shaped thing. Okay. We had a wholesale customer. I'm not going to name names here.
Okay.
People might be able to guess. And then one day he switched. Well, one day he complained about our packaging because then we switched from the diamond, I think, to something rectangular. Okay. What came next was, and guys, this is probably a real collector's item. Anyone who's got, sorry, glasses again. Anyone who's got that, gripper, one of those in that packaging, that is probably quite a collector's item compared to the one above. And anyway, he complained when we switched to that packaging. Well, we found out that was because he was busily building, his version of a knockoff in China.
And I know who they are.
And of course, they were going with the diamond packaging. And anyway, that was kind of funny. Yeah. Yeah. We found it, by the way, that was a pattern that we would run into. We would have some of the people who would copy us had started off as either wholesale customers or the people that we helped a lot. Next thing you know, they're trying to put their hand in our pocket or knife in my back, whichever, and I try to look at that this way because this is something we should talk about. I had a friend in Strongman, and we were talking about people copying things, and he said, "Look, it's irritating. These aren't his exact words, but it's really good. That means you've got something people want. If they're trying to steal it from you, that means it's good. When you should really be worried is when they're not copying you." And I thought, well, that's actually kind of a wise way to look at things. But that's a funny story in the packaging. That's true. And that, marked the first, I think, really big, like large scale attempt to copy COCs. The funny thing is that gripper, which you could buy wholesale, at least Ironmind, we could buy grippers from that factory in China for like $1 or $1.50. They were originally selling those to the same price as Captains of Crush grippers, and people on the grip board were selling for that. And I thought, why are you doing this? I mean, you've got something that's like a Lada in the old days, and you're trying to sell it as if it's I don't know what, high-end Mercedes for the same price. So anyway.
And then I noticed that there were maybe 2 more rectangular versions of the packaging. Why did you make those changes? Because I think that they are all beautiful, but I was wondering, why did you change the designs or the image of the background?
Yeah, I don't know what really motivated some of those artistic changes. Just the design things. But the current package, which is vacuum sealed, I should have had one here. The one that people know, the black. And I should tell you a funny story about that. I mean, if you wanted to take a break would it ruin things if we took a break for 3 minutes? I could run down to the warehouse and grab a package. Would that be good, or should we just keep talking about it?
Just keep talking about it. I can add like the image on the video edition.
Well, I wanted to
So
show people something. Would it ruin the flow if we just paused for a minute or not?
we can. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, how do I do that? If I hit leave, that's not going to be good, right? I'll just let this keep running, okay? And you'll edit it out. Take me 5 minutes and run down to the warehouse.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
No problem.
So, back, I mean, if you know, kind of the history of certification, originally, we just required a picture, okay? So like Richard Soren was certified that way, okay? And then someone else had to take the picture. And I used to kid people that, if I was there when someone was taking the temp, they had the easy part closing the gripper. I had the hard part taking the picture, capturing when it was closed, right? And so now kind of our joke is, when guys are certifying, if you watch the videos, unless the guy's got some wicked knife that he's going to whip out, so lots of times people struggle more opening the gripper package than anything. And we say, it's kind of funny because there's a tab in this corner and it says bend, peel, and open. And that's how you open. If you just bend, then you can pull the whole thing apart. So that's one advantage of this packaging if you read that. This is our latest, it's got a hang hole, people can use. We've got the critical information in the back, most of which most people don't read. Occasionally, someone will say, I don't know why, I've been using my gripper every day. I go to work, I have an hour commute each way, and I do reps the whole time I'm driving. And 16 years later, one day it broke on me. Oh, did you ever read that these are not designed for like just doing mindless reps? And, by the way, that's something I think that we should talk about because, big thing that Ironmind's done, it's not just the products, and certifications and sponsoring group contests, but in terms of educating people on grippers, we did a lot of really fundamental things because prior to Captains of Crush grippers, people would get, what we call, plastic handled sporting goods store grippers, and they would sit there and do 500 reps, because that was all, they had no resistance. And the way that we would explain to people that didn't work was we said, first of all, always think of this gripper as being analogous to a barbell loaded to really heavy weight. You're doing squats or deadlifts or power cleans with it. Treat it the same way. Same respect, same basic principles, warm up work sets, don't overtrain, recover. And we would say, look, if you were trying to bench press, say 500 pounds, you wouldn't do sets of 50 push-ups all day, right? So why do you think you're going to get stronger on your grip when you're just mindlessly doing all these reps? All that you're going to do is break the grip, prematurely. So anyway, I think that was like a really fundamental thing in teaching people different ways to train, and the idea of think of this as something serious. And, we would say of our grippers that, if closing grippers was an Olympic event, we'd like to think that they'd use Captains to Crush grippers. And I think we gave grip guys, a level of respect that they never had in the strength world. Right before that, there were people who are always like, grip strength specialists. I'll go back to like, David Horn goes way back, like, being an actual, a grip specialist doing significant feats of strength. But there weren't many people like that. And, Captains of Crush grippers, we kind of made them into a bigger thing than grippers had ever been before. And one day it was the Highland Games or Strongman contest. We were in Scotland. 1994 probably, and a guy I always had grippers with me because they say people I'd always like John Brzezinski, whoever, can you close this gripper, right? And guy had tried it and he threw it, kind of tossed it back to me, and another guy walking by goes, "What number was it?" And I turned to my wife Elizabeth and I said, "I think we've arrived." He knew that was an Icelandic guy. He knew that it was a Captain's Crush gripper. He was asking, what number was it? As opposed, he knew that this was like a special gripper. And that was a thing too. We talked about the handles and the look, and people now, I mean, they even copy this sort of trade dress thing, that we have in the middle. And it's like, it's amazing. I don't know. I think some people, they can't think of anything new, because I will guarantee you that if I were going to start a gripper business, I wouldn't copy this gripper. I'd make a new gripper. And that's what we did with Zenith. Zenith is so different. Hang on one sec, please. I mean, see, Zenith is so different, and everyone who copies Captain's Crush grippers, I mean, they come up with, their attempt to mimic this. And we said, well, you know what? Let's show the world a whole different way to design a gripper, something that, works differently, and did this. And I am Tug also, this was kind of a favorite for a while. I mean, when this first came out, before he kind of got pummeled, I think, on the grip board for supporting it, Richard Soren said to me, he says, "What tree were you sitting under when you came up with that idea?" Sort of like the Newton apple thing. So anyway, yeah.
Super good. Since
Perfect.
you
We need at some point talk about, if we could, certification and the card,
yes,
because there's a lot of misunderstanding that, I just haven't really figured out the right way to explain it to people. And maybe we can take advantage of you being here and talk about all the whole thing with certification, and what an uproar there was when
yes,
we started the card and how you use the card.
that is a hot subject. But before we jump into that, since you have the package there with you, I was curious to know, where does the poundage of every level come from? I read something in the book, like something that Richard Soren said, but I didn't quite retain it. So I'd love to hear it from yourself.
Yeah.
Where does the number come from?
We never would put anything on there. And Richard was saying to me, it's really, really kind of a missed opportunity. You need to put something on it. But see, I could understand a lot better than Richard could, I think, with all due respect, why we didn't. Okay. Richard didn't know, for example, that his 45-pound plates didn't all weigh 45 pounds. So I explained that to him. I said, Richard, go weigh them. Okay. That's what's called an uncalibrated plate. This goes back to our earlier conversation. Someone like me I've been to like dozens and dozens and dozens of world weightlifting championships, 5 Olympics and weight. Okay. This is like standard stuff there. Okay. You have a calibrated plate. It's got to be so precise. It's unbelievable. A standard, it's like York 45-pound plate is going to be well off. Okay. Tom Lancier, founder of Ivanko, he told me once, and he was the first guy to go to Asia having stuff made. And this is like many, many years ago. He said to me, you got to be really careful when you negotiate on a price on a plate, because you'll get that price on your 10-pound plate. But the thing is, it might weigh 7.5 pounds, right? They'll cut the material to meet the price that you wanted. Okay. So anyway, we decided, okay, well, there's, reasonable compromise on this. And people who look closely will see that, for example, it says guide C period 60 pounds, C period. Okay. It means approximately. Okay. So we always tell people, a bunch of things when they call up and they ask about ratings. First thing we tell them is most ratings are worthless. They're absolutely worthless. Okay. They're fictitious numbers. You can't, anytime you see, say, grippers that are rated 150, 200, 253, okay, you should know that's a lie. It's like you ask someone, well, what's your best bench press? 450 pounds. What's your best squat? 500 pounds. What's your best deadlift? 600. You don't have PRs like that. Okay. It's like 172 kilos, right? Or, 387, pounds, whatever, it is. Okay. You're going to have numbers that aren't neat like that. Okay. So the first thing we tell people is most ratings are completely bogus. They're just in there for advertising. The second thing is, if they're not completely bogus, take all numbers, including ours, Ironminds, with a grain of salt. Why do I say that? Okay. We explain to people there's no universally accepted way to come up with, say, a poundage rating. So what you're dealing with is, it's like you're talking about different currencies. You're talking pesos when you give a number, you're talking euros, you're talking dollars. They're not comparable. Okay. Third thing is, I say to someone, okay, you tell me you've got a 150-pound gripper. What does that mean? Okay. Usually you get a pause. Okay. And I say, okay, if it's a barbell plate, it's very simple, right? You throw it on a scale and you weigh it, right? And whatever that number is, that's how difficult, or the weight of that plate. What do you do in a gripper? I don't know. Well, now they send it to Matt. Matt will give them, a rating. Okay. But then the next question is, how do you get that number? Okay. How do you get that number? What's your test? Okay. And the simplest thing is, okay, where in the handle you're applying force? I mean, just one very simple question. And so, because you've got the absence of these things, and the original ratings, okay, that were done lacked what, what the technically trained person would say they lacked inter-rater reliability, which meant that the same thing wasn't rated the same. You didn't get the same rating, okay? And they also didn't have test-retest reliability, which meant that people were sending the same grippers back and they get different ratings the second time. The rank orders would change. So it wasn't very accurate. I think what Matt's got's probably, I'm assuming, is very consistent now. However, he gets, his ratings, he probably uses the same method and can probably go back and test the same gripper again and come up with the same number. The other thing I would tell you too, though, see, even if that number is perfect, there's no single number index that I know of, maybe someone smarter's got one, that tells you how hard it is to close a gripper. Even if you had a perfect measure of closing force, okay, you guys know that doesn't really tell you everything about how hard the gripper is to close, okay? Warren Teddy used to tell me about a friend of his. He trained by putting oil on his hand before he closed the gripper and say, why did he do that, Warren? Warren said, because it made it harder to close. And I thought, yeah, but I could hit myself over the head with a hammer for 10 minutes and try to do squats and make them harder, but I'm not sure it'd make me any stronger. But the real point is, it's like the knurling thing, okay? This gripper, no knurling, okay, absolutely guarantee you, of course, that if you knurl that, it's going to be easier to close, okay? And we explain that too to people another way in terms of knurling. We say, look, take your gripper you can't quite close. Take your finger. We don't really advise you do this, regularly, but just grab the coil, hold the coil steady, and you'll close it, okay? It's because the gripper's not moving. It's like a car with, sloppy suspension. It's not going to, you're not going to be able to drive as quickly, at least in certain courses, as a car that's got tight suspension. And that's sort of like, what's going on with the grippers. So we got them in a way that I kind of described in the book, okay? It was force, was weight hanging down. And that, I believe, is what inspired the original RGC method, okay? They don't do it the same way that we describe. We don't want to describe it in too much detail. Although I will say, we just finally scrapped our fixture. I said, I have no interest in any of this anymore. Matt's rating grippers, very well for lots of people probably all over the world. And I thought, well, maybe for historical purposes, I should at least take pictures and then maybe send them to Matt or someone. But I said, no, that's that for it. But the RGC was a variation of what we were doing, because I think I said this is basically, what we did to come up with these numbers. And then what we would do, I would say this too. Sometimes, people say, oh, I got this gripper, and it's just like, it's such a beast, it's such an outlier, and we get it back, and it really wasn't true at all. Or this gripper got weaker, and, check it now, it didn't, and so we did that. But for a long time, I would say that we had probably tested in that way more grippers than I mean, Matt would be so far ahead of probably, I'm sure, anyone on the face of the earth. Number 2 doesn't even matter at this point. But after a while, I kind of grew tired of racking up more numbers like that. But that was basically it. So something probably very similar to what Matt does, although probably measured at a different point in the handle and some other details being different. But as I say, I think that came from this book, the COC book, and I think that's what Dave Morton and who was the other original RGC guy? I can't think. There are 2 guys, and then they quit in the business. But yeah.
Perfect. So let's jump into the origin of the COC certification. A couple of days ago, I was speaking to Nathan because I knew that at the beginning you had, and correct me if I am wrong, Randall, but firstly, you could certify with a parallel set, then with a 25 millimeter block, but the rules change. The rules were changing, so
Yeah.
you're telling me no. Please correct me. How was it? How was it?
See, this is an example of what I was talking about earlier. See, this is really, it's quite simple, but for whatever reason, there was never, so far at least, hasn't been a lot of emphasis in transmitting accurate history, let's put it that way, in the grip world. Okay, so I hear all these things, it was this, was that, whatever. Okay, originally, we would say to people, okay, position the gripper, however you'd like, comfortably in your hand, okay? But no one dreamed of doing a deep set, okay? Well, I mean, what later can be called deep set. Okay, then I'm trying to think, what's the name of Bill's book? Bill Kish. KTA, okay? KTA, right? KTA,
okay.
Okay, and all of a sudden this idea of like, dog leg and all this stuff came out, and the deep set. Okay. And Bill will say, well, people were doing deep sets before that, but I would say not. You can look at the certification list and the number of people certified by year, and you'll see that when the deep set was really introduced wide scale, okay, on the grip board, things suddenly changed. Well, why was that? Well, instead of running a 100-meter dash, now guys were running a 70-meter dash. Okay. So then what Ironmind did was we said, okay, we're going to try for 1 year. Well, we're going to try a 1-inch gap, because we kind of got sucked in, unfortunately, in this myth of, oh, my hand is too little, right? Now, by the way, what we say to people, this is why I say Ted's, the evil Dr. Strossen, my hand's too little. I can't close the 3 with a credit card set. Can you close the trainer? Yes. Well, then if you can't close the 3, it's because you're just too weak to. It's not because your hand's too small. The width of the credit card doesn't change. Okay, it doesn't change. Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry. So where were we on this? Oh, the 1 inch?
idea.
Yeah. So we say 1 inch.
Yes. 1 inch. Yes.
And so then what happened was we found people had remarkably variable ideas of what 1 inch was. Okay. Some people thought this was 1 inch. Some people thought that was 1 inch, but it didn't work at all. It was a massive failure. And so we stopped that. And then we said, okay, I got death threats. I think it was either then or when we did the card, and we'll morph into the card, because by then people on the grip board felt it was sort of their birthright to get certified. Now, look, I can accept the fact that I am not capable of dunking a basketball. I don't care what you do to me. Okay. I hung out with all the, top weightlifters for decades. Okay. There was a time when I saw in person every single world record that was on the books for men. Okay. Did that make me a good weightlifter? I'm still a mediocre weightlifter. Okay. I didn't have the talent. Okay. But people believed that they had the right to certify in the 3. Okay. See, I had to chat with Richard about this back in the really early days, because I felt that the 3, you had to be genetically gifted. You had to train. You should probably had to train hard and be, at least relatively intelligent about your training, but not everybody could do that. Just as not everybody would be able to run the 100 in under 10, right? Or dunk a basketball, or, something different. Not everyone could learn integral calculus. Okay. We all have different skills. Okay. We're not all 6'4". Okay. And anyway, that created a big problem. And we thought, well, we want to do something that's going to, sort of like it's some way recognize that maybe it doesn't have to be at entirely the full width, that people think their hand's too little, something reasonable. But we also, from what I said about the 1 inch, remember the 1 inch rule is in there for 1 year. Prior to that, I don't know how many years it was, guys just closed it, what, people would now call cable no set, right? They just picked it up and they closed it. Okay. So we said we need an objective measure. What can we use? Okay. So most people, okay, and the copycats who came later would say, okay, what can I make that's artificial that I can sell them? I'm going to sell them what they have to use, but not nasty Ironmind. Okay. We said we need something that's universal. It's subjective. It's readily available. It's free. Okay. Credit card, COC card. Okay. Everyone had a card. Okay. It's objective. Okay. We're not going to quibble now about what is 1 inch. Okay. It's this width. This is the width. Everyone's got one. They don't have to buy anything. Okay. The original copycats of this concept both came out with something that people had to buy from them to get the measurement, which kind of cracked me up. But anyway, so then this, you had to do, my other hand. This idea was, this was the minimum starting position. Okay. I should probably put on reading glasses, get a better idea, because there's confusion about this. Okay. Some people think they've got to squeeze the gripper down to the point that it fits in there. Okay. Is that showing up? Okay. You don't have to. You could start this way. It's got to be a minimum of this width. It can't be less. Okay. But it doesn't have to be that width. It can be wide open. This defines the minimum legal starting position. Okay. And we still have guys stumbling with that, and guys going faster. What they'll do is they'll put the card on one side and then they'll brush it. I don't know if you can see that. They'll brush, across the top of the handle on the other side, or they'll bend the card and push it through. Did those show up? Could you see what I was talking about?
Could you put your arms like upper? Yeah.
Like that more? Is that okay? So one thing is guys will put the card on one side. Is that showing up? Okay, they'll be
Uh-huh.
inside the handles. It's supposed to be on the outside. They'll have it overlapping on the other side. Okay, that's
Yeah.
illegal. Or they'll just flagrantly bend the card and push it through
Mm.
really fast. Okay, and anyway, this has worked remarkably well because everyone's now on a level playing field. Okay, and hand size isn't a problem. Okay, think whether you think your hand's too big, too small, or perfect for a COC gripper. With the card, it's sort of like the COC Silver Bullet Challenge. It kind of takes hand size out of the equation. It sort of neutralizes that a bit, I think. And we've been very happy with this. It's worked well. And we just ask guys, when you get certified, do this correctly so that the referees don't turn you down and people later say, oh, you did this wrong or that wrong. Remember, it's the minimum. That's the minimum width. Okay. Don't overlap like that. Don't bend the card. Just show that the card fits through, or you can come from the bottom and do that. And then just close it and you'll get certified. That was a
I
3.
want I wanted to go back to the idea of creating a certification, because
Yeah.
I am sure that you were like the pioneers
Yeah.
on the concept of having a certification
Yeah.
to like having like a recognition and a signal that you are like
Yeah.
over like the average. So
Way.
how was
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly, what I was thinking when I came up with the idea, but I recognized that Richard was so far ahead of anyone. Back then the grip world was very simple. The top tier was, it was, four names: Richard, Soren, John, Brookfield. Okay.
okay?
Richard, Soren, John, Brookfield is, now there's a lot of talent out there, and it's not just in the US, it's worldwide. And we got to get more, from South America, Central America, Spain, all these other countries that, aren't participating that much yet. And people were really kind of amazed. I mean, it was people who tried the grippers could understand how remarkable Richard Soren's hand strength was compared to theirs. Okay. We would tell people, okay, originally we had 3 strengths of captain's crush grippers, 1, 2, and a 3. Okay. And we would tell people, honestly, most men who lifted weights, bodybuilding stuff, beach muscles in the gym back then, wouldn't be able to close the number 1 the first time they tried. Someone more likely to close a number 1 first time would be someone who used his hands, say, for manual labor, or grip strength ran in his family, because we'll find that is something that's true. So anyway, people appreciated that, and we recognized this was something special, and we wanted to give Richard some recognition, and that's how it all started. And then it kind of kept rolling, from there. And it is one of the best known accomplishments in the strength world. I don't just mean grip, but I mean it is so well known. I mean, the number 4 captain gripper has been the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I mean, so it's
and it has been in some movies. And actually, I wanted to mention you that whenever here in South America someone thinks of like hand strength or improving your grip, they think of 2 things: captains of crush grippers and the credit card set certification.
That's
it's
great.
so famous. So famous. It's like when people meet me, it's like yeah, I am into Gripsport. Oh yeah, so the captains of crush and using with the credit card. And I don't know if you
Thank
have
them.
friends in Spain like these days, but
couple, yeah.
but teenagers in Spain are obsessed with the credit card set. It's
Are
like
they really? Yeah.
yeah, they are like that's the main thing I want to achieve. Like not the Rolling Thunder or the Hub or any pinch block. It's like no, credit card set.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it shows that what great taste they have. But
yeah.
yeah,
So
thanks for telling me that. Yeah.
I am curious to know, with the certifications, Randall, do you evaluate them yourself, or is there any judge on Ironmind too?
Oh yeah, no, we use multiple judges. There might
Okay.
be an occasion where something is so clear I don't even have to take anybody else's time, and we'll go split decision. If someone has a close miss, it's like in weightlifting, you only need 2 white lights, or powerlifting, right?
Yeah.
2 to 1. I would say most of the time attempts are unanimously passed or unanimously turned down. We have some splits, 2 reds, 1 white, the other way around. I have a friend in weightlifting. He's like multiple-time Olympic team weightlifting coach, and he kids about, people say, oh gosh, he almost made that 182 kilo clean and jerk. And when really all the guy did was deadlift it, right? He wasn't close at all, wasn't close. But the coach and athletes go, oh, I almost made it. My friend, this is Jim Schmitz I'm talking about. His definition of a close miss is 2 reds and 1 white. So at least one of the 3 referees thought the lift was good enough to be passed. Majority didn't. Okay. And we use that same system. So once again, that comes from my background, strength sports. That's the system that we used. We used to, when we did live, it just purely live, that was 1 referee. And a real strength of doing the video thing now, one advantage of it is that instant replays. And I got to tell you, some of you guys out there gotten certified have driven us nearly blind when we're looking at these, playing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, although nothing like, I guess, what some guys do in the grip board when they're suspicious, and they were suspicious in one case recently for very good reason. And I tip my hat to everyone. And the guy who figured out one guy there asked me a question that I think blew the lid off, the cover on that thing. So, which we appreciated. Now that's interesting. What lengths people go through, to claim they're certified. How embarrassing, but it shows, what value they attach to it.
Yeah.
And that's all, by the way, that's all due to you guys who are out there succeeding or trying, and the level of involvement, level of strength that we're seeing now. I would never have predicted this. People are getting so much stronger. We're seeing guys out there now that are making the number 3 look like, a toy.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, well, right now, the standard is to certify with the credit card. And it took many years to have a new name certified on the number 4 with Carl Myerscough. Do you think that in the future maybe you will require to set a new rule for certification, like in many years when I don't know, maybe when you have 10 names certified? Do you think that you will change the rules?
Oh, no. I think the rules are good. I thought what you were going to ask me is, would we make a harder gripper? And I would say no. We decided quite a while ago that we weren't going to do that. Obviously we could sell something, 4.5 or a 5 or, whatever thing, some ludicrous thing. And we decided that was not really what we wanted to do. That's why I thought we asked, no, we're going to change the rules. No, see, let me explain this, okay? Because it's an important point. Okay. This was not like vindictiveness. I'm kind of like making fun of myself when I call myself, Ted's evil Dr. Strossen. Okay, that's sort of, I think, how I was viewed by some people when we did these things. Okay, when we changed the credit card rule, I got at least 1 death threat I can think of, and I used to kid people because I guess that on the day that we made those announcements, there were 3 announcements. I guess Gripboard traffic was absolutely off the charts, and I told people that didn't they know that Bill Pish and I had made a deal, and he was paying me 5 cents for every wizard that you got that day. And a lot of people believe that, don't worry, Bill did do nothing about this, it's coming up. We did that because the spirit of the challenge was being sullied. Okay. This is an honor thing. It's a certain thing. Okay. It's like we had a guy, okay, he was trying to break a world record in a Rolling Thunder pulp. I think it might have even been 1-armed. And it was clear if you looked really closely, he was pushing off with his toes. And I thought, well, some people would say, look, the athlete's job is to cheat or do whatever he can to succeed. And that's why you have referees and judges to catch them. We felt the spirit of this was being violated by the deep set. Okay. And we also saw that having the subjective legal start was not good. It didn't work. It just did not work. And so we came up with, this objective standard. You can't quibble with the width of this. Okay. And it defines still, the original nature, of this challenge. It keeps it pure. It maintains that tradition. Otherwise, what you've got is a system where, go back to, say, the sprint thing. The original times all came from people running the 100, and then it became the 98, and then the 87, and the 57, and they're all getting the same credit. Okay, this will make me even more unpopular with some people, but people who say they lifted the Denny Stone, they use lifting straps. What planet are you people on? Okay, that's like, when they used to do like these assisted bench presses. Oh, well, I squatted 1,500. Yes, I had a forklift behind me. Okay, the challenge in the Denny stones is having the grip strength along with the back strength and everything else to lift them. Lifting straps, who cares? That doesn't count. And people get really angry with me when I say that, but that's sort of the way that's how I feel.
Perfect. I want to like move away for a second from the grippers, and I wanted to jump into two of the products of Ironmind related to grip that I personally like a lot. The Rolling Thunder. What's the story behind that piece of history, that like the that art,
it's funny. I should have asked you ahead of time, because I was cleaning out my garage and I found an original Rolling Thunder, original
black version.
Yeah, I could have showed it to you and explained the differences. Okay, so that came from this idea of thick handled grips, or it's hard to lift things with a thick handle. Okay, so by the way, that's also that plays into like why a single number index in a gripper doesn't work. Okay, and I tell that to people. I think I might even have the book. Put 90 kilos on standard weightlifting bar, power clean it. Okay, no big deal. Put that on a 2-inch bar. It's a completely different story, right? Smooth bar, knurl bar. Okay.
Randall, sorry, but I want to say that some of your phrases, it's like remembering the book like the same words. It's really amazing.
Well, I mean, that's good, because my memory is not what it used to be. Okay, and my cognitive ability is not what it used to be. So I'll take that as a compliment. So this idea of thick-handled bars, has always been in the grip world, and people probably know this, and David Horn being an example, someone who can explain this in a lot of detail. Part of that, it wasn't that it was done by design, but materials were such in some of the earlier days that handles had to be thick to be strong enough to support the amount of weight that guys were lifting. Okay, so anyway, to make that, to sort of in honor of that tradition, the thick open hand challenge, make it even harder, something that was revolving. And that's where the Rolling Thunder came from. That idea. So the idea of thick handle, but let's add another dimension. Let's make it revolve so it's harder. And the reason for that, I really wish I had one here, was, people were cupping their hand. Maybe if I stand up, they're cupping their hand under the handle rather than thumb over it. And then, of course, it just becomes a matter of wrist strength. It's not grip strength at all at that point. And revolving helped with that even more, making it a pure test of grip strength as opposed to wrist strength. So that's where they came from. Plus, it was plate loadable. So now this idea of progression, because like with grippers, you can only do so many progressions. Maybe this is something you want to ask me later, but I'll talk to you about what we call the half-step grippers. Like the 0.5 and 1.5, 2.5. Okay, yes. There's a limit to those gradations you can make in grippers, right? Which is why I said earlier that if you're looking at a brand of grippers and they say the grippers are 150, 200, 250, okay, should tell you right away, red light. These are all lies, okay? But now when you go to a plate loaded thing like the Rolling Thunder, you can have whatever increments you want, 1/4 kilo, right? Put a 1/4 kilo plate on there. So then I can fast forward, okay? That was a fairly primitive product, okay? Now we'll go to the dark side of this, okay? So we had guys who, I did 300 pounds on my Rolling Thunder, okay, and you get them in a contest, and they couldn't even do 220. I mean, they were like, they looked like Girl Scouts, with 220, then all of a sudden these 300-pound lifters, guys who were saying they did 300 pounds on it. Okay, part of that is that guys could intentionally monkey with their Rolling Thunder handle, turn it into a non-Rolling Thunder, okay, and part of it is it can happen sort of naturally. And so we wanted to, this is what I thought you were going to ask me, how it went from that original Rolling Thunder to the current version.